Today, we're going to talk about line and rigging.
All right, cats and kids away. Line and rigging. Our lovely model here is holding Spiderwire Stealth. This is 50-pound braid. This can be found at Walmart. Cost you about 13 bucks. I love it. It's great. I recommend it. All right, here's what we're doing. We're changing the braid out of this reel. So the braid that's on here is about 5 years old. The stuff lasts forever. The only reason I'm taking it off is because it has some knots in it, and it's just getting old. It happens. There's some things that you want to think about though whenever you're putting 50-pound braid on your bait caster. Braid doesn't break. You can't bite it. You can't break it with your hands, anything like that. This stuff is literally mini rope. So if it's so strong and so difficult to work with, why are we using it? I'll tell you why we're using it. Okay? Because you're throwing in the weeds, you're throwing in the bushes, you're throwing into a bunch of crap. You want that 50-pound test. And braid does not stretch. So whenever you set the hook, that's everything's going into that hook set, right? You're not losing anything. That's why we're using it. Braid is also very smooth. It's very slippery on itself, right? Um, Even if you've never used a bait caster, I'm sure you've heard of the horrible word backlash. Well, this is one of the ways that I avoid that with braid. So before I spool on any braid, I get a couple layers of some mono. You can use fluoro too. If you don't know the difference between fluoro and mono, fluoro sinks, mono floats. On the back of the reel, it's really not going to matter because it's never going to touch the water. The reason you do this is to give the braid something to grab onto on the reel because that stuff's smooth. Invest in scissors or something that can cut braid easily and keep it with your tackle. All right, this is one of the three knots we're going to talk about today. This is the Alberto knot. This is the knot that you're going to tie from your mono or fluoro that you started off with to your main line braid. All right, this just connects the two lines. Um, it is a very small knot. It will fit through your eyelets if you do it correctly. There are other knots out there. I really like to do this one. It's easy and it's like 98% strength if you're a knot nerd. Once you got your main line braid tied on, you're going to want to go ahead and spool it up. Make sure that you keep pressure on the braid as you spool it, or you're going to have some problems if it's loose on the spool. I get snagged all the time. I don't want to ruin all my braids. Well, that's why we use a leader. Use a leader so you can break it when you need to. With 50-pound braid, I like to use 15-pound fluoro. Fluoro sinks. I like to use the fluoro for all of my soft plastics, all that stuff. If I was bent on using, some weightless worms or whatever, I would use some mono because again, mono floats. Now, if I'm using top water, I'll just tie it directly to the braid because braid also floats, and I am not gonna get tangled up with my top water on a kayak because if I do, then I'm just gonna float over and untangle it. It's that easy. It's part of the reason I got a kayak. To tie on your leader, you're going to use our old friend, the Alberto knot. Same thing. It's great. It fits right through the eyelets. You're going to want about 6 to 10 feet of leader line. I just like to grab the spool with one hand and stretch it out. My wingspan, I cut it and I use about 6 feet of it. Whenever I'm tying on a hook, no matter what the hook is, I'm using a Palomar knot. Palomar knot's really easy. Hooks break off all the time. I could tie a Palomar knot in seconds. If I'm hooking something up like this punch rig or a lure or something, I like to use a little different knot. I like to use the improved clinch knot. It's easy, another simple knot. Um, Again, I recommend these three knots. They're really easy to use. I use them. There are hundreds of knots out there. You know, use whichever one you like. Thanks for watching, guys. Oh, and check out all the knots on 101knots.com. That's where I get all these visuals.